I think the collaboration has been terrific. And as I look back on I think I'm in my 41st year in federal government, I quite frankly can't remember a team effort across government on one single activity that is a better example of teamwork than this one. Our mission was twofold, as has been mentioned. We were to handle the transparency piece of the Recovery Act and set up a public-facing website, and also to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse of the recovery monies. Both of those missions are fraught with challenges and high risk. And I remember testifying up on the Hill in the spring and the summer of 2009, I think with some false bravado that we would be able to pull all that off by October of 2009, a mere 5 months. So in fact, we did stand up 2 websites in that time frame. One website called federalreporting.gov captures the data that the recipients send us, and the other website, recovery.gov, actually displays the data. So that today American citizens can go on recovery.gov and drill down into their own zip codes, congressional districts, counties, and see exactly where the recovery monies have gone in their neighborhoods. And that is I would stipulate that probably certainly meets the mandates of the Recovery Act and brings a new level of transparency to government that hasn't been here before. The second mission of the Recovery Board, the fraud, waste, and abuse part, is perhaps a little bit more intuitive to a group of 13 IGs than building websites. But from the very beginning, the IG community took the position that we had to do things differently with this amount of money. This was an awful lot of money, and I think rightfully so. Predictions were that sophisticated criminals would come and look for this money. So we actually changed the paradigm in the IG community and moved away from the traditional audits and investigations that sort of the hallmarks of detecting fraud, waste, and abuse, and moved the ball to the front end of the fraud spectrum to try to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse from happening in the first instance, or at least interrupt it in the middle of the losses so that we could prevent the whole amount of money going down the street. So to do that, the Recovery Board developed something that we call the Recovery Operations Center, which is located in our headquarters across the street. And that center has a whole bunch of bright young analysts and sophisticated analytical tools. As the Vice President mentioned, we got from other government agencies that are using them principally in the counterterrorism and the law enforcement world. And the novelty of our Recovery Operations Center is we're using these old tools in a new way on government spending, and it's working out very well. We're actually preventing fraud from happening in the first place. We're interrupting fraud in the middle of somebody trying to take it or waste it. And of course, we are detecting fraud after it's also lost. So there has been fraud. There will continue to be fraud, but nowhere near what the pundits and skeptics predicted. And I always knock on wood and say that we've been able to keep this fraud to a minimum, and I think it's because of this paradigm shift and a new way of thinking for IGs. Going forward, we need to improve the websites as we try to do every month. We need to look for new tools for our Recovery Operations Center that can help us detect fraud and prevent fraud. And we need to figure out how we institutionalize some of these strategies and tools in government as we move forward. Mr. Vice President, you and I have talked about this as being a template for the future. As mentioned earlier, we've done some pilots in the Recovery Operations Center on Medicare. We're doing one on VA. We're going to do more in the future. All of that has led us to believe that the tools and strategies we're using on recovery monies are just as applicable to other kinds of government spending and other kinds of government activities. So we're very encouraged by that. Finally, I think I would be remiss today if I didn't mention what I believe to be the most positive residual benefit of the Recovery Act. And that's the positive relationship that's developed between agencies and inspector generals. It turns out if the common goal is to detect fraud, waste, and abuse, understandably IGs come to the table very enthused and aggressively, and agencies sort of take a back seat. It's, after all, the IG's job to do that. But when we changed the goal to preventing fraud, waste, and abuse, my observation is that both parties come to the table with equal enthusiasm. And that has been wonderful to see. And all over government, agencies and IGs, who normally have a healthy degree of tension amongst them, are working collaboratively to bring this off. So I'm going to end on that positive note.